That peace.
Morning, Peter.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks for sending that love and peace out to the world. I'm going to be reading from the Revised Standard Version of the Bible today, Isaiah 6, 1 through 8. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to the other and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of his who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, "Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Then flew one of the seraphim to me, having in his hand a burning coal, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth, and he said, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is forgiven." And I heard a voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go from us?" And I said, "Here I am, send me." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The gospel reading for this morning is from the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verses 1 through 17, and I'm reading from the Message translation. There was a man of the Pharisee sect, Nicodemus, a prominent leader among the Jews. Late one night, he visited Jesus and said, "Rabbi, we all know you're a teacher straight from God. No one could do all the God-pointing, God-revealing acts you do if God weren't in it on it." Jesus said, "You're absolutely right. Take it from me. Unless a person is born from above, it's not possible to see what I am pointing to God's kingdom." "How can anyone," said Nicodemus, "be born who has already been born and grown up? You can't re-enter your mother's womb and be born again. What are you saying with this born from above talk?" Jesus said, "You're not listening. Let me say it again. Unless a person submits to this original creation, the wind hovering over the water creation, the invisible moving the visible, a baptism into a new life, it's not possible to enter God's reign. When you look at a baby, it's just that, a body you can look at and touch. But the person who takes shape within is formed by something you can't see and touch, the Spirit, and becomes a living spirit. So don't be so surprised when I tell you that you have to be born from above, out of this world, so to speak. You know well enough how the wind blows this way and that. You hear it rustling through the trees, but you have no idea where it comes from or where it's heading next. That's the way it is with everyone born from above, by the wind of God, the Spirit of God." Nicodemus asked, "What do you mean by this? How does this happen?" Jesus said, "You're a respected teacher of Israel, and you don't know these basics? Listen carefully. I'm speaking sober truth to you. I speak only of what I know by experience. I give witness only to what I have seen with my own eyes. There's nothing secondhand here, no hearsay. Yet instead of facing the evidence and accepting it, you procrastinate with questions. If I tell you things that are plain as the hand before your face and you don't believe me, what use is there in telling you of things you can't see, the things of God? No one has ever gone up into the presence of God except the one who came down from the presence, the Son of humanity. In the same way that Moses lifted the serpent in the desert, so people could have something to see and then believe, it is necessary for the Son of humanity to be lifted up, and everyone who looks up to him, trusting and expectant, will gain a real life, eternal life. This is how much God loved the world. God gave God's Son, God's only, one and only Son. And this is why, so that no one need be destroyed. By trusting in him, anyone can have a whole and lasting life. God didn't go to all the trouble of sending the Son merely to point an accusing finger, telling the world how bad it was. He came to help, to put the world right again. This is the gospel of our Lord. The theme I've taken for this morning is the theme, standing in the stream of holiness. It comes from the Isaiah passage that struck me so hard this time, where it says, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of God's glory. And it struck me that there is holiness streaming forth, like the river of the water of life that we have emblazoned the front of our sanctuary at Emmanuel for the healing of the nations. And that our task is simply to stand in that stream of holiness. It's very much like the wind, too, the wind of the Spirit, to stand in the breeze and allow the breeze to move us. And so I'm imagining wind and spirit and holiness as a kind of force, life force in the world, and that our task is simply to stand in the way, to be nurtured by it, to be blown by it, to be touched by it. And so I'm planning to tell some stories of people who I think stand in the stream of the Spirit. Some of them you may know, some of them you do not know, and see how their lives bore fruit from where they decided to stand. Dave Schraber knows this person. This is Sister Beth LaValle. When I grew up, I had two brothers and no sisters. But since coming to Rochester, I've gotten a bunch of sisters. And Sister Beth is a sister of mine. She is a sister of St. Joseph. And Sister Beth is a life force. She is a force to be reckoned with. And she does that because she is rooted in the stream of holiness, that she has rooted her life through the disciplines of the Sisters of St. Joseph and through her absolute commitment to working justice in the world. Sister Beth, I think I've known her for 30 years now. And she said that one of the most important meetings in her life was to meet with Sally Dodson. Now, Sally and Ken Dodson were American Baptist missionaries in Assam in the north of India. Ken is a doctor and still living. And she met with Sally, and this Catholic girl who had not known any Protestants to speak of ran into this Protestant woman, Sally, and the two of them hit it off, and they were of one heart. And it gave Sister Beth such encouragement to know that there are true believers in the love of God and in the justice of God that aren't necessarily Roman Catholic. And so the borders were crossed and the friendships were built. And now Sister Beth works with me and the Greater Rochester community of churches. And she's working like a dynamo on a project that we're working on to have a community-wide service of mourning for those who have died of COVID and during the COVID era here in Rochester. So on Sunday, July 11th, we're planning to have a big service at the Martin Luther King Park downtown. And we're calling forth names of people who have died. And the relatives are invited to come and share the names of people who have died during that awful crisis. It strikes us that the ability to mourn is something our country is not very good at. And yet our tradition as Christian and Jew and Muslim is to be able to claim that ability. Here's another sister, Sister Marlene Vigna. She's a sister of mercy. And Marlene and I have been working together on the spirituality team for the Greater Rochester Community of Churches. Sister Marlene is another force of nature, rooted deeply in the stream of the holiness of God through her discipline as a sister of mercy. She was hit by, she was in an auto accident 2 days ago, and her car was hit from the side by a man who was blinded temporarily by the sun on his window. And she was sitting in the back seat, and she has fractured vertebrae in her neck right now. But Sister Marlene is so glad she's still around, and so am I. She is one of my dear sisters whose life was changed by her discipline of living and standing in the stream of God's holiness. I picked up a bunch of other sisters along the way. You know some of these folks. These people all touched my life. And all this came from the friendship of the Trinity, the friendship of God, because we are together rooted and seeking to live in the holiness of God and in the movement of the Spirit. Here's another one you don't know personally. Jane Goodall. She is the winner of the Templeton Prize for Religion this year. Jane Goodall, at the age of 26, without a college degree, but because she had loved animals all her life, she went down to Gombe National Forest in Tanzania. And she began her lifelong journey of friendship with chimpanzees and other living things. She saw animals as individuals with personalities. That wasn't done in the academic arena in her time. She was the first to see that chimpanzees were tool makers. She was always approaching them with empathy. She spent day after day just watching them. And then night after night writing about them. She started out with a candle. She couldn't afford a typewriter. Year after year, befriending them, she would get an intuition about their behavior after watching them carefully. And she would think, oh, I think that's why he did that, or she did that. And then as a scientist, she put on her scientist hat. She got a PhD from university in England, from Cambridge. And she put on her scientist hat to try to prove whether her intuition was right. And so for her faith, her intuitive nature, her empathy was wedded with her scientific knowledge. She was awarded the Templeton Prize in Religion for this year. The Templeton Prize was established by Sir John Templeton as a philanthropic venture in 1972. He created the prize because he wanted to recognize discoveries that yielded new insights about religion. And he set the award amount above that of the Nobel Prize in order to recognize the importance of what he called progress in religion. And so we're having here the wedding of science and faith in this woman and in many others. Dr. Francis Collins received the Templeton Award last year. He is head of the National Institutes of Health, and he is an evangelical Christian. He headed up the Human Genome Project, and so he is a scientist of the first order, and yet he is also a believer. Well, Well, there is a page missing. How about that? All right, this is what John Templeton's granddaughter, Heather Templeton Dill, said about Jane Goodall. Her discoveries have profoundly altered the world's view of animal intelligence and enriched our understanding of humanity in a way that is both humbling and exalting. Ultimately, her work exemplifies the kind of humility, spiritual curiosity, and discovery that my grandfather, John Templeton, wrote about and spoke about during his life. In the university, they asked whether the university approved of her thought, and she said, "No, I was told I did everything wrong. I shouldn't have given the chimps names. It was scientific to number them. I couldn't talk about them having personalities, minds, and emotions. Those were unique to us, to humans. I was actually taught in the early 60s that the difference between us and animals was one of kind. We were elevated onto a pinnacle, separate from all the others. But my dog, as a child, had already taught me that wasn't true. You can't share your life in a meaningful way with a dog, a cat, a guinea pig, a rabbit, a horse, a bird, a pig, and not know that, of course, we're not only beings with personality, we're not the only beings with personality, minds, and emotions." This is what Jane Goodall says. "What I love today is how science and religion are coming together and more minds are seeing purpose behind the universe and intelligence." She has been standing her whole life long in the stream of holiness. That's where we are at Emmanuel, standing in the stream of the infinite holiness of God, joining the joyful relationship of goodness, love, and joy, watching love set us free and knit new friendships. I love the stories people tell about Kathleen going down to the library and then running into Joni and having a hug. I love the fact that Jan and Joni got to see each other. I love the friendship, the strange and beautiful friendships that have developed because people who are very different people are working together. I think of Fred and Bill working on the building and forming a friendship because of their commitment to something bigger than themselves. Watching love set us free, trusting the one who came as God offering for eternal, not everlasting life. There's so much destructive energy being uncovered now in our world, but we are uncovering also the friendships in the world. We're uncovering friendships that are deeper, that are transhuman. The discovery made not too long ago about how trees cooperate with each other, even across different species, and how underneath the ground they send warning signals and they encourage each other. There is so much being discovered about the hidden truth that Jane Goodall found about the fact that empathy is a way of dealing with things and not cold, hard facts. The Republican mayor of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is uncovering the mass graves of the Tulsa race massacre that happened 100 years ago on Tuesday. We're uncovering things that we did not want to see. And yet all this is the movement of the Spirit. Peter Mitchell, our beloved Peter, wrote yesterday, "What I have learned is that there is an infinite intelligence, what many would call the divine one or God, and that at its core, this divine one is all love, and that we carry this divine spark or seed at the very core of our essence." So I'm advocating today, not necessarily that we take on any more new projects. I'm advocating that we position ourselves in the stream of holiness, that we take a look at every moment of our lives and make course corrections. It is so easy to get sidetracked these days, to subsume our activities in the clickbait that comes along our way, to spend hours and hours surfing the net, to feel outrage at the latest outrageous thing that goes on. And yet there is another source that's pouring forth from the heavens, holiness. There's holiness and justice and peace being poured forth in us. I'm not very good at standing in the stream of holiness. I fall into old patterns. I press on too hard. I demand much of myself and of others. I am not in control sometimes of my feelings, but the natural flow of holiness is there all the time. If I can step back and breathe and listen to the wild geese and spend time in silence and in prayer, we open our arms to it and we offer it freely to others. I'm offering now this opportunity for us each to assess our lives and to recognize how we can step away from those things that tear us apart toward the energy that builds us up. In Louisville, Kentucky, there is a plaque on a street, and it may be the only plaque in the world that talks about a mystical experience. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk who lived for his life in Gethsemane Monastery near Louisville, Kentucky, was doing some errands in the city of Louisville. The Trappists take vows of silence, and they create a separation between themselves and the world. He said in Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world, the world of renunciation and supposed holiness. This sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud. I have the immense joy of being a man, a member of a race in which God himself became incarnate, as if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me. Now I realize that we all are. And if only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be experienced. There is no way of telling people that they are walking around shining like the sun. It is that realization that we receive in this stream of holiness. So let us reorient our lives and let us spend more time in that place of nourishment, and our lives will be transformed, and we, like Sister Beth and so many others, will become agents of tremendous and profound change in the world. God bless us, everyone. Amen.